opening remarks, I'd like to recognize some very special guests. First of all, President and Mrs. Jerry Supple are here this evening, and we're so glad that you're here with us tonight. And Jerry's sister Colette is also visiting from New England, so we're glad to have her down here in Texas. Also, Dr. Bill Mears, the director of the Learning Resources Center, is here, and Joan Heath, the Southwest Texas University librarian, is here as well. We appreciate their support. They're our faithful supporters, and we appreciate it very much. And I certainly want to recognize, way back in the back as always, Bill and Sally Wittliff, the founding donors of the Wittliff Gallery. Special thanks to Bill Wittliff and to Mara Levy. Where's Mara? Because they helped me arrange and hang the photographs in the exhibition this evening. They're my helpers, and we always have a lot of fun. Bill claims we don't listen to him, but we do. Anyhow, and as always, very, very special thanks to the staff of the Special Collections Department, because they help so much, right up to the very last minute and the bitter end, getting ready for these exhibitions. Mandy Oates, our archivist, and Emily Paynton and Mary Garcia, our library assistants, and also our student assistant, our student workers. We had the help of many of them, but Margot Motomochi is with us this evening also. Margot's back there helping out. Thank you. And a special thank you to Barbara Haberecht, who luckily had time between motion picture gigs to help me arrange the biographical case on the women photographers in the foyer. And thank you, Barbara, if you're still here. Oh, she left already. She was here all day and was here until last night until 11 o'clock. So anyway, it's worse than the movies. I mean, these are 14-hour days. Anyway, one of the most enjoyable things about doing a photographic exhibition is getting to spend a lot of time with very fine works of art. In this case, the works of 9 extraordinary women, 3 generations, who literally have joined hands and hearts to reach out across the 20th century to show us who they are and to confront us with the essential stuff of life. Lola Alvarez Bravo, Kati Orna, Mariana Yampolsky, Graciela Iturbide, Flor Garduño, Yolanda Andrade, Alicia Ahumada, Ángeles Torrejon, and Maya Goded. They all know each other, although Lola has now passed away, and Kati lives a somewhat secluded life in Mexico City in her later years. Lola Alvarez Bravo began the chain. She was the most prominent of the first generation of women photographers in Mexico, and probably the first one to earn a living through her photography. She and her then husband, Manuel Alvarez Bravo, who's the dean of Mexican photographers, became friends in the 20s with that great crew of artists that inspired the cultural renaissance in Mexico in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Rivera, Kahlo, Siqueiros, Orozco, and Tina Modotti, who stayed behind when Edward Weston went back to the US in 1926 and became Lola's best friend and an inspiration to her as an independent woman. The next link in the chain is Hungarian-born Kati Orna, who came to Mexico in the late 30s with her husband after the defeat of the Republican forces in the Spanish Civil War. She was a documentary photographer during the Civil War. We have one of her photographs from that, a vintage photograph from that period. Although she always denied being a surrealist, she soon fell in with the group, got to know Lola Bravo. You can imagine, they talked about Tina Modotti and the Civil War and communism and fascism and Weston and Bravo, and above all about photography. They both became influential teachers in Mexico City, and Lola for many decades was the director of the photography department at Bellas Artes. In the late 1940s, Mariana Yampolsky, who was another immigrant, but this time from the US, arrived in Mexico City. She was fresh from the University of Chicago, full of beans, She headed straight for the Popular Graphic Arts Workshop, which was a hotbed of political dissent and great artistic talent. She became an engraver and the first woman elected to their board of directors. There's a picture of her in the case in the middle of her group of comrades at the Popular Graphic Arts Workshop. She was a very petite woman and a wonderful artist. When she was considering taking up photography as a discipline, because she came to photography through engraving and printmaking, she decided on Lola Alvarez Bravo as her teacher. They remained close friends until Lola's death in 1993, which is another link in the chain. Later on in the 1960s, Mariana Yampolsky and Manuel Alvarez Bravo became the mentors to Graciela Iturbide, another one of our women artists. Then Katy Orna, in her turn, was mentor to Flor Garduño, also in the show. That was in the late 70s and early 80s. Alicia Ahumada, who's the great printer and photographic craftsman, became a printer for both Mariana and Graciela, learning from both of them and being much influenced by their work. Ángeles Torrejón is in the third generation of women photographers represented in this show. She's a friend and colleague of the entire group. She's well known to them as the director of Imagen Latina, which is a news agency that provides photographic images to magazines and newspapers worldwide. Her photography, although much impacted by the photojournalism of her brilliant husband, Marco Antonio Cruz, whose photos we have as well in our collection, but her photographs, although she learned a lot of her darkroom technique from him, but her photographs have her own distinctive and feminine angle. She travels regularly to Chiapas to photograph the daily life of the Zapatista National Liberation Army, and also the lives of the Indian sympathizers in the Zapatista territory, focusing primarily on the women and children of both of these groups, including sometimes their flights into the jungle when they're pursued by the federal forces. Maya Goded is the youngest of the 9 women. She links to the chain as a protege of Graciela Iturbide. She, like Graciela and Mariana, has worked with specific tribal groups in Mexico. She's now branched out to photograph prostitutes in Mexico City, which is kind of a tribal group itself, actually, when you think about it. And she's currently turning her lens, this should be a great series, she's turning her lens on the ubiquitous salones de belleza in Mexico City, the beauty shops, which are on every corner and just fabulous. When I was a student in Mexico City, it was a favorite spot. That was back in the days of the bushel basket hairdos. Together, they form a complex and unbroken chain of creativity. It reminds me in a way of the double helix that forms the basis of our own genetic structure, because one senses not only the myriad complex connections represented in this group of women and all their tangential relationships, but also the potential for ongoing communication with future generations of artists by way of an uninterrupted creative sequencing. It's wonderful to look at these images over and over and until you start to see the aesthetic connections between them. Little homages here and there, borrowed elements, overlapping spiritual territory. They're each strong artists and able to stand alone, but together they're a formidable force. And I think their Mexican voice will speak with resonance throughout this century and beyond. In this parade of our 9 artists, I have omitted one. That's because I'm going to introduce her now. She is Yolanda Andrade, and we're very, very fortunate to have her with us this evening from Mexico City. Just briefly, she began her study of photography in Rochester in 1976, returning to Mexico City the following year. She took part in 1978 in the very first Colloquium of Latin American Photography, which was organized by Pedro Mayer and his colleagues. She's worked steadily in the intervening years as a still photographer for Mexican film companies, a freelance magazine photographer, a staff photographer at Editorial Provedemex. She's worked at the National Endowment for Culture and the Arts, In 1992, she began teaching photography at various institutions in Mexico City. She's twice received grants from the National Endowment for Culture and Arts in Mexico, and in 1994, she was the recipient of a Guggenheim Memorial Foundation Fellowship. In 1988, she produced a book of 41 images, Los Velos Transparentes, Las Transparencias Veladas, with text by well-known art critic Carlos Monsiváis. Her images may also be seen on Pedro Mayer's Exquisite website. You all, if photography fans, you should really tune in. It's called Zona Cero, Zonazero, and it's really fabulous. Her photographs have been widely exhibited in one-woman shows and group shows in Mexico, the US, Canada, and Europe, and they're in the collections of museums, including, happily, our own, in California, Japan, Mexico, and Texas. So on behalf of the Wittliff Gallery and the Southwest Texas State University, I'd like to welcome Yolanda Andrade.
Thank you very much. I'm always asked if I'm afraid to take photographs in these streets of Mexico City. I have to confess that when I'm more afraid is when I have to talk in front of the public, not in the streets. But anyway, I overcome it some way. First of all, I have to say that I'm very grateful with Bill Wittliff, with Connie Todd, with Dennis Darling, with the Southeast University of Texas, with the University of Texas, because they made it possible for me to come here. I have really enjoyed being here. I have been very happy to know people, because I have found that everybody is so friendly, so fine, that I have really been very happy in this place in Austin. The first time here. And I also have to say that I'm very grateful to this country too, because it has been very important in my development as a photographer. I didn't know anything about photography when I was accepted at the Visual Studies workshop. I studied there on one of my teachers was Nathan Lyons. He was and he is still an inspiration for my work. I also won the Guggenheim Fellowship, as Connie said. And I think that I'm very proud too to be in Bill Wittliff collection, because it's one of the finest collections of Mexican photography. There's not such a collection even in Mexico. So this is this is going to be, it is already important, it's going to become much more important when times goes by. And I'm sure that many people will have to come here to San Marcos to make research on Mexican photography. And well, I know, as Connie said, we all know, Mexican photographers are like a big family. We know each other. We still have Don Manuel Alvarez Bravo. I'm very proud to visit him frequently to see how he's doing. He's also an inspiration for me, because he's already 28 years old. He still takes photographs. He's a man who loves life. And whenever I feel down or depressed, I think of him and I say, well, this is a man who is 98 years old, and he loves life. Why should I feel so depressed? I mean, I should follow his example. I also have to say that I had the opportunity to meet Lola Alvarez Bravo. She was such a fine woman, so generous, so giving. Every time I asked her to see my work, like maybe 15 years ago, she always had the time to see it, and she always had the words to encourage me as a photographer. Now I'm a very close friend of Mariana Jampolsky. She's a very generous person too. I think that the 2 grants I won from the National Endowment for the Arts in Mexico was thanks to her, because she knew I needed it. So that was, she made it possible for me to go on with my work, so I'm very grateful to her. I know the other photographers too, the youngest ones, and I kind of belong to the sandwich generation of photographers, because there was Katy Orna, Lola Alvarez Bravo, Mariana Jampolsky. Then I came with the second generation, and then there is a very talented third generation working very hard. I think that we are all building Mexican photography together, and well, I have to only to say again, thank you to everybody who is here present, who came, who took the time to be here for this opening. Thank you very much.
One thing I forgot to mention, if any of you are interested in these images are so fabulous, and there's really not much of a commercial market in Mexico, but if any of you are interested in purchasing some of these images, you can contact us and we'll put you in touch with the artists in Mexico, and be happy to do that for them and for you, because they're beautiful images. The commercial opportunities don't exist in Mexico as they do here through galleries and so forth. So there's, it's very interesting because it's caused a different development in the photography in Mexico. It doesn't have the commercial, they're not driven by the market as much as they're not impacted by it as much as the photographers here, if they are. So anyway, we're so glad all of you came, and please enjoy the exhibit, stroll through it again, and look for those connections and that I was talking about before. I think it's the kind of exhibit I think you'll want to visit more than once, and we're so glad you all came.